Paramedics who arrived a few minutes later confirmed the obvious: no signs of life. The young woman was dead. Age, approximately 18 to 20 years old. Brown hair, slim build, summer clothes. The first thing that caught the eye was the numerous abrasions and bruises on her arms, shoulders, back, and face. They were fresh, and the nature of the bruises indicated that the girl had tried to resist. The expert recorded a fracture of the hyoid bone. This is a classic sign of strangulation. Moreover, there were visible hemorrhages in the eye area and under the eyelids. The forensic experts established that death was caused by mechanical asphyxia. Traces of friction against the ground were also found on Jennifer's back and legs, indicating that her body could have been dragged after she lost consciousness or died. Her clothes were partially removed, but there were no signs of sexual violence. Dear viewers, in the next video releases you will find very intriguing and confusing cases. And in order not to miss them, be sure to subscribe to the channel and please like the video. Jennifer Levine was born on May 21, 1968, in the heart of New York City. The city that never sleeps. A city where glossy luxury coexists with invisible cracks. Where ambition intertwines with loneliness, and the desire for success is often accompanied by an internal struggle. But in this restless, shimmering world, Jennifer seemed to radiate her own light from an early age. She grew up in a family where love was real, despite her parents' divorce. Her father, Stephen Levine, owned an art gallery in Soho, a creative person with a fine sense of taste. Her mother, Ellen, raised her daughter in an atmosphere of care and freedom, on Long Island, in a calmer and more measured environment. Jennifer lived between two worlds, suburban silence and city bustle. These opposites formed a balance in her. The ability to be dreamy and at the same time pragmatic, open and cautious, emotional and insightful. From an early age, Jennifer felt a maturity that surprised those around her. She wasn't just a smart kid, she was a keen observer. At school, teachers noted her curiosity, her quick mind, her unconventional questions. She was beautiful. There was no denying it. Tall, slender, with expressive eyes, she attracted glances. But her appearance was not her main value. She had an inner energy, a special charm that came not from clothes or hairstyles, but from her character. She knew how to be bright without effort. She could show up at a party in a simple t-shirt and still become the center of attention, because it wasn't about the clothes, but about how she walked into the room. With a slight smile, with a confident step, with a feeling as if she knew exactly who she was. As a teenager, Jennifer did not strive to live up to expectations. She was not a rebel in the classic sense. Rather, she intuitively followed her own path. She could argue with a teacher if she thought he was wrong, or refuse to participate in something that went against her values. Not for the sake of conflict, but for the sake of principle. She realized early on that being yourself is not always comfortable, but it is honest. She adored art. She was drawn to words, to images, to form. Jennifer drew, kept diaries, wrote short essays that no one but her read. She watched people, in cafes, on the subway, on the street. She made up stories for them. Sometimes she would say to her friends, "Look at that man with the umbrella. His heart is clearly broken. See how he holds that umbrella. As if he is holding not an object, but a memory." Her friends laughed, but listened. Because there was always something alive in her words. Her teenage life took place between Long Island and Manhattan. In her last years at school, Jennifer became part of a close circle of young people from private schools and well-to-do families. They would gather in bars on the Upper East Side, listen to music, talk about the future. Jennifer wasn't just there, she was there. Not by being loud, not by being brash, but by being real. Where others were playing roles, she was just being herself. She graduated from Baldwin High School on Long Island and was planning to attend Chamberlain Junior College in Boston in the fall. This was supposed to be her new start. For the first time, outside of New York, outside of the familiar circle where everyone knew everyone else, Jennifer said she wanted to start with a clean slate. Friends remember how she dreamed of new people, a new city, the opportunity to become someone else. Or, conversely, to finally become herself. Despite her apparent confidence, She, like all teenagers, experienced her own anxieties. Sometimes she said that she was afraid of not finding her place, that it was hard for her to decide who to be. She was drawn to psychology, to journalism, to art. She did not want office life. She was attracted to stories, real, human ones. She wanted to tell them. Or maybe just live in such a way that every meeting she had became a story. She had an especially warm relationship with her father. He did not just support her, he believed in her. They could talk for hours about art, about people, about meaning. He didn't push, didn't lecture. He listened. And in this listening, Jennifer felt important. She often visited him at the gallery. She sat on a high stool at the counter, watching people come and go, how they discussed the paintings, how creativity hung in the air. This was her world, and she shone in it. With friends, Jennifer was the life of the party, but not the one who joked louder than everyone else, but the one who was drawn to. It was easy with her, safe. She knew how to keep secrets. She knew how to console. She knew how to remain silent when words were unnecessary. Friends said that she always knew what to say, and when. Sometimes they called her the big sister, not because of her age, but because of her wisdom. But for all her maturity, Jennifer remained a teenager. She fell in love, made mistakes, worried. Sometimes she suffered silently, sometimes she cried into her pillow. But she never lost faith in people, even when they let her down. She used to say, "Everyone makes mistakes. The main thing is not to become callous." By that summer of 1986, Jennifer was on the threshold of a new stage. She was 18. She stood on the border between adolescence and adulthood. Her world was full of expectations, going to college, moving, making new friends, new challenges. She dreamed of traveling, trying herself in different professions. But most importantly, she wanted to be happy. Really. Not for the sake of status, not for the sake of a career, for the sake of a sense of inner meaning. New York in those years was a contrast. Wealth and danger lived side by side. Jennifer knew this city. She knew its rhythm, its rules, its shadows, She knew how to be careful, but she did not live in fear. She was not naive. She was observant, smart, real. The last weeks of summer were filled with meetings, conversations, a slight sadness of partings, and joyful anticipation of something new. Jennifer lived in anticipation of change. She packed her things, went to parties, shared plans. She was a living person, with dreams, with worries, with great potential, and with a great love for life. New York is a city that never sleeps, even in the summer, even on weekdays, even after midnight. Its streets breathe the warmth of asphalt, mixed with exhaust fumes and the aromas of street food. People come out of bars, taxis flash their headlights, some hurry home, some look for more of the night. But at the end of August 1986, a sense of change hung over this familiar noise. Summer was drawing to an end. There was an elusive anxiety in the air, as if something had shifted behind the facades of old houses. It was Monday, August 25th, one of those evenings when nothing foreshadows tragedy. The calendar says the end of summer. People were returning from weekends, from summer houses, from the beaches. The streets of Manhattan were again filled with voices, cars, movement. The Upper East Side lived its usual predictable life. The neighborhood's residents dined in restaurants, and young people, mostly from well-off families, flocked to familiar establishments where the bartenders knew them by name. One of these places was Dorian's Red Hand, a cozy, dimly lit bar on the corner of 84th Street. That's where 18-year-old Jennifer Levin headed that evening. She was looking forward to a new life. In a matter of days, she would be moving to Boston, starting school, taking her first step into adult independence. This evening was an opportunity to say goodbye to the city, to her friends, to the familiar world of youth that she was about to leave. Around 10 o'clock in the evening, Jennifer came to the bar. Witnesses later recalled, she was wearing a light summer dress, with her hair loose, smiling, calm. The bar was already crowded. Young people were chatting, laughing, ordering cocktails. The space was filled with the hum of voices, the light smell of tobacco and music, a mix of pop hits and 80s classics. Jennifer merged with this background, not standing out, but not getting lost either. Those who knew her came up, exchanged phrases, hugged. She seemed relaxed. There was not a trace of anxiety on her face. Over the next 2 hours, she talked to several acquaintances, moved from the bar counter to the table, from time to time went outside. The bar was her usual environment. Safe, understandable. It was here that she spent evenings with friends in recent months. Here, no one asked who you were or where you were from. Everyone was part of the same generation, the same world, the same illusion of security. By midnight, the place began to empty little by little. Some had already gone home. Someone went to the after-party. Someone went for a walk along the night streets. Witnesses later said that Jennifer left the bar around 1:30 in the morning. She walked toward Fifth Avenue, perhaps to Central Park. The street was quiet. In New York at night, this is a rare, almost strange state, when the honking of cars, footsteps, voices seem to be muffled by an invisible hand. Like before a storm. From that moment on, there is silence. An hour, maybe an hour and a half. No one knows exactly where Jennifer was at that time. Surveillance cameras were rare in those days. Cell phones did not yet exist. The city went silent. And with it, the answer to the question of what happened in that short period. The morning of August 26th began as usual. The first rays of the sun touched the roofs of houses. People began to appear in Central Park, runners, cyclists, dog owners. The darkness of the night had already receded, but the air had not yet filled with the noise of the day. It was about 6 in the morning when one of the early visitors to the park, a man in his 50s walking his dog, noticed something strange in the grass, not far from the north side of the Metropolitan Museum. At first, he did not pay attention to it. Anyone could be lying on the grass, a homeless person, someone asleep after a party, a random passerby. But as he approached, the uneasy feeling grew stronger. The dog became alert. The man stopped. A few meters in front of him lay a woman's body. It was almost motionless, partially covered by leaves and earth. There was no breathing. There was no movement. He stepped back and went to the nearest street phone. His 911 call was restrained but clear. "I'm in Central Park, near the museum. There is a woman here. She is not showing any signs of life." The call was responded to quickly. The patrol that was on duty in the park area arrived at the scene within minutes. 2 officers approached the indicated point, looked around, and saw the body of a young woman. She was lying on her back. One shoe was removed. Her purse was nearby. At first glance, it was clear. Medical assistance was needed, but it was too late. The paramedics who arrived a few minutes later confirmed the obvious. There were no signs of life. The young woman was dead. Age, approximately 18 to 20 years. Hair brown. The build is slim. The clothes are summer. There are signs of a struggle everywhere. The grass is trampled. The skin is scratched by branches and bushes. The police cordoned off the area. They set up a perimeter. The forensic experts began to work. But everything that was happening seemed unreal. A sunny morning. A park where children and pensioners walk every day. And here is a scene that resembles a crime drama, not reality. The officers began to comb the area. And almost immediately, they found a key detail. A small black purse containing an identity card. Name: Jennifer Levin. The stated date of birth matched her appearance. The purse also contained lipstick, powder, a comb. The usual set of a young girl. All this confirmed. In front of them was a student, still very young. With plans, dreams, a life that only yesterday seemed endless. While the city was waking up, the police were filling out the documents. The perimeter remained closed. Passers-by slowed down. Some asked questions. Some simply watched in silence. The scene was silent, as it only happens where something has recently gone forever. Information about the find had not yet leaked to the press, but it had already begun to circulate among the reporters on duty. The phones in the editorial offices began to ring closer to 9 in the morning. First, dryly. A woman's body was found in Central Park. Then, with clarification, it looks like a young girl, possibly a schoolgirl or a student. And finally, closer to midday, the first names. While a new day was beginning in the city, one of its children, a young girl with a smile and dreams, would never wake up. The first hours after Jennifer Levin's body was discovered were a race against time. The New York police, already aware that this would not be a routine case, acted quickly but cautiously. The crime scene in Central Park was immediately cordoned off, and forensic experts began their examination. Despite the open space, investigators managed to record several significant details. The grass was flattened, footprints were found near the body, and all this indicated a struggle. But who could have done this? Why here? Why her? There were far more questions than answers. The only thing that was clear from the start was that the girl did not die a natural death. While the experts were busy collecting evidence, the homicide squad began interviewing everyone who could be connected to Jennifer. The girl's name soon became known to friends, family, and the general public. And with it came not only sympathy, but also shock. Young, cheerful, socially active. She was not a typical victim. Her face graced family photos. She showed up at parties. She was part of a certain circle. The cops knew. The higher the social status of the victim, the louder the noise, the closer the attention. But this was not just a media storm. It was a matter of honor. Within a few hours, the officers had picked up the first threads that could lead to a solution. One of them was the evening before. Jennifer spent it at Dorian's Red Hand, a popular bar on the Upper East Side where young people from wealthy families gathered. Investigators were among the first to go there. The waiters and bartenders recognized the girl. Yes, she was there. She did not come alone. She was in the company of friends. She talked, laughed, but she spent a lot of time especially with one young man. His description matched several witnesses. Tall, dark hair, athletic. One of them said his name, Robert Chambers. At that moment, the police did not jump to conclusions. They needed more. They requested security footage, even though in 1986, video surveillance was not as ubiquitous as it is today. But the bar provided everything it had. A list of orders, bills, anything that could help piece together a timeline of events. Jennifer Levin's body was delivered to the morgue the same evening it was discovered. The chief medical examiner was Dr. Elliot Gross, an experienced forensic pathologist who had already handled high-profile cases in New York. The examination began immediately. The first thing that caught the eye was the numerous abrasions and bruises on her arms, shoulders, back, and face. These injuries indicated a struggle. They were fresh, and the nature of the bruises indicated that the girl had tried to resist. The key moment was the examination of the neck. There were clear traces of pressure on the skin. The examiner recorded a fracture of the hyoid bone, an injury that is almost impossible to receive by accident. This is a classic sign of strangulation. Moreover, there were visible hemorrhages in the eye area and under the eyelids, further evidence of oxygen deficiency. Forensic experts determined that death was caused by mechanical asphyxia. That is, the girl was strangled, with her hands or using an improvised means. Jennifer's back and legs also showed signs of friction with the ground, indicating that her body could have been dragged after she had lost consciousness or died. It was also noted in the report that no traces of third parties were found at the crime scene. Everything indicated that the encounter was personal and ended tragically. Jennifer's clothes were partially removed, but there were no signs of violent actions in a sexual sense. This was important. The pathologist emphasized that no proven motivation related to sexual violence was recorded. But the abundance of bruises and wounds confirmed that the conflict was physically intense and one-sided. Robert Chambers' name quickly became key to this investigation. He was found in the alumni list of the same private school where Jennifer attended. He was not her boyfriend, but they clearly knew each other well. His address was listed in the area of East 90th Street. Detectives headed there without delay. Robert opened the door as if nothing had happened. He looked a little tired, but not alarmed. When he was told that Jennifer Levin was dead, his face changed, not immediately, but noticeably. According to the investigation, he did not ask any questions, but only briefly answered that he was with her yesterday, but did not know where she went. This was alarming. The officers noticed something else. Robert had abrasions on his face, scratches on his hands. He said that he had injured himself while repairing furniture. The police officers exchanged glances. It was too convenient, too timely. They recorded the damage in a photo and insisted that he go with them to the station to give an official statement. Robert agreed. He made the way to the station in silence. In the building of the 19th precinct, he was taken to a separate room, and the interrogation began. It lasted for several hours. The investigators didn't press, but they kept coming back to the same topic. When he last saw Jennifer, why there were fresh injuries on his body, and what happened between them after they left the bar. At first, Robert insisted that they had separated at the entrance to the bar. But gradually, as investigators presented him with more and more witness statements, he began to get confused about the details. Later, he admitted that they had left together and spent time in the park. This was the first time he mentioned spontaneous intimacy that allegedly escalated into something uncontrollable. His story seemed constructed, as if he had been preparing for it. He said that the girl was too persistent, and he pushed her away, not wanting things to go too far. When he realized that she was not showing signs of life, he became afraid and ran away. This version did not match the evidence. Forensic experts found signs of strangulation, as well as numerous bruises indicating a struggle. By this point, investigators knew that they had found torn women's clothing in Robert's closet, remarkably similar to what Jennifer had been wearing. They had also seized a diary in which Chambers had described various episodes of his relationship, some of which were downright disturbing. It was all starting to fit together into a grim mosaic. But the police still hadn't made an arrest. They needed a solid argument, not just a suspicion. They continued to collect evidence, questioning dozens of people: Jennifer's friends, Robert's former partners, acquaintances, teachers, anyone who could shed light on the psychological profile of both. In parallel, forensic work was underway. Hair found under Jennifer's fingernails was sent for examination. DNA analysis was in its infancy at the time, but forensic experts were still able to confirm it was a man's hair. Comparison of the structure with Chambers' sample yielded a match. His story was beginning to crumble and the pressure from the police was mounting. The more he talked, the more confused he became about his story. And at some point, more than 24 hours after his initial interrogation, he broke. His confession was restrained, emotionally emasculated. He said that things got out of control. He claimed that he was defending himself. But the investigators didn't believe him. They knew that this wasn't just a scared young man. This was a man who had tried to hide the truth until the very end. The arrest of Robert Chambers came as a bolt from the blue for the entire city. The public didn't yet know the full truth, but rumors were rife. The press sensed a sensation, and the case became public knowledge. Headlines were filled with terms like love murder, fatal night, and the Preppy case. But behind the beautiful words lay a tragedy that would have to be broken down into facts in the courtroom. And although the case was just beginning, the police officers fighting for justice for Jennifer knew that they had everything they needed to bring the investigation to an end. The trial of Robert Chambers began amid incredible publicity. New York City watched the events unfold with avid attention. The headlines screamed, "Crime in Central Park, Beauty and Death, Murder in the Golden World of Privilege." Every move by the prosecution and defense became public knowledge. Every interrogation was discussed on the pages of the tabloids and on the evening news. The atmosphere was tense, as if what was happening affected every inhabitant of the city personally. But beyond the media noise remained two families, one mourning a daughter, the other desperately trying to protect a son. In the courtroom, emotions bordered on nervous tension, and it all began with a simple but important question. Would there be a trial on charges of second-degree murder, with an admission of intent but without prior planning? The prosecutor's office insisted from the beginning. Before them was a cold-blooded crime. They relied on forensic evidence that showed Jennifer's death had not occurred instantly, but after prolonged physical force. Evidence of a struggle, injuries to her body, marks under her fingernails, testimony about her fear of Robert. All of this formed a picture. She did not want to die, she fought. And Robert Chambers, according to the prosecution, did not simply lose his temper. He made the decision to use force and followed through. But it was not only the prosecutors who spoke for the prosecution in the courtroom. Their voices echoed the anger of society and the voices of Jennifer's parents, who had been forced to listen to the details of their daughter's last night. They sat in the front row, every day without fail. Their gaze never left Robert for a minute. The defense told a different story. Robert Chambers' lawyers relied on the image of a good boy from a good family, who, according to them, became a victim of circumstances. They argued that what happened that night was the result of a game that got out of control. The defense was built around the thesis of consent. Allegedly, there had been an intimate struggle between Jennifer and Robert, during which she had suddenly increased the pressure, and he, frightened, began to defend himself. The lawyers avoided the word strangulation at all costs, replacing it with expressions like incident, contact, conflict. Robert sat in the courtroom, his eyes downcast, carefully feigning remorse. But most of those present sensed that something unexpressed was hidden behind this calm. Perhaps coldness, perhaps indifference. He did not shed tears. He rarely looked in the direction of Jennifer's parents. Society was divided. Some saw Robert as a bright, promising young man who had fallen victim to pressure and cruel circumstances. Others saw him as a manipulator who used his background and appearance to evade punishment. Television analysts argued live on air. Newspapers published psychological portraits. Popular talk shows invited experts to discuss male violence, class inequality, privilege, and justice. Actions in memory of Jennifer took place on the streets of New York. Her portrait with dark eyes and a slight smile became a symbol of youth that was not given a chance. The key moment in the trial was the discussion of the admissibility of certain evidence. Defense attorneys tried to exclude some materials from the case, citing violations of detention procedures. Prosecutors, in turn, argued that Chambers' confession, although not recorded in full on video, was voluntary and consistent with his rights. However, the trial did not follow the classic scenario. A few weeks before the sentencing, when tensions were running high, the parties suddenly reached a deal. The prosecutor, fearing that the jury might not come to a unanimous decision due to pressure from the defense, agreed to reclassify the charges. Robert Chambers pleaded guilty to manslaughter, without proven intent, but with the fact of causing death. This decision caused a wave of indignation among supporters of the Levin family. Jennifer's mother left the courtroom in tears. She would later say in an interview, "They killed her twice, first in the park, then in court." The court's decision was short. Robert Chambers was sentenced to 15 years in prison, the maximum for the charge. The judge noted in his conclusion that he took into account the defendant's age, lack of a criminal record, and guilty plea, but also emphasized the severity of the consequences and the pain caused to the family of the deceased. For many, it was a compromise that left an unpleasant aftertaste. Too soft for the killer, too harsh for those who believed in innocence. But the trial was over. Robert was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, under the flashes of cameras and the silence of the courtroom. Jennifer Levin could no longer tell her version, and society remembered this name for a long time, as a symbol of a young life cut short at the very beginning.